From depression to triumph, a new journey. Right now, somewhere close to you, maybe in your own house, maybe in your own chair, there is a person smiling on the outside who is dying on the inside, convinced that the heaviness they carry is simply who they are now forever. They are wrong. And before we're done here, you're going to know exactly why. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you something most people never get told. The very darkness you're standing in right now is not your destination. It is a corridor. And corridors, no matter how long and no matter how dark, always lead somewhere. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to see your own pain differently than you've ever seen it before. So let me ask you plainly, what if the heaviness you're carrying isn't proof that you're falling apart? What if it's proof that something in you is about to be rebuilt, stronger than it's ever been? Depression is not a character flaw. It is a season. And this single reframe, small as it sounds, has the power to change the entire trajectory of a person's life. Because what you believe about your pain determines whether you spend your energy fighting it or fighting yourself for having it in the first place. Think about how quietly this lie takes root in a person's mind. Depression settles in, and instead of recognizing it as a season passing through a life, a person begins to fold it into their identity. They stop saying, "I'm going through something dark," and start saying, "There's something wrong with me." They stop saying, "This heaviness arrived," and start saying, "I've always been broken. I just didn't know it yet." Do you see the shift that happened there? A temporary condition got mistaken for a permanent character trait. Weather got mistaken for climate. And once a person believes their darkness is simply who they are, rather than something moving through them, they stop looking for the exit. Because you don't look for a way out of something you believe is your permanent nature. But look at how the actual world works, the one right outside your window. There has never, in the entire history of the earth, been a winter that stayed. Not one. Every single winter that has ever descended on any field, any forest, any frozen lake, has eventually, without exception, given way to spring. Winter does not negotiate. It does not check in with the ground to see if it's ready. It simply, on its own timeline, loosens its grip and moves on. Every single time, in every single place, without a single documented exception in all of recorded history. And I want you to notice something important. The field does not do anything spectacular to end the winter. It doesn't fight it, doesn't will it away through sheer force. It simply stays alive underneath the frost, quietly, patiently, until the season does what seasons have always done. It changes. Your depression is under the exact same law. It feels endless because you are inside it. And anything you're inside of, without a clear view of the exit, feels as though it must be permanent. But feeling permanent and being permanent are two entirely different things. And confusing the two is one of the costliest mistakes a person going through a hard season can make. The heaviness you're carrying right now, however real, however exhausting, however convincing it is in this exact moment, is still governed by the same law that governs every season that has ever existed. It moves. It changes. It does not stay forever, no matter how loudly it insists that it will. This is why the way you talk to yourself during this season matters more than almost anything else you'll do. If you tell yourself, "I am depressed," as though it were a fixed identity, you will unconsciously start building your entire life around that identity. Smaller choices, smaller risks, smaller hopes, because that's what you build around a permanent condition. But if you tell yourself, "I am in a depressive season," you leave the door open for the one thing every season has ever guaranteed: an ending. You give yourself permission to keep planting things, even in the frozen ground, trusting that a season built to change eventually will. So if you are standing in the middle of your own winter right now, unable to see any hint of spring anywhere on the horizon, I want you to hold on to this the way you'd hold on to a rope in the dark. This is weather, not character. This is a season, not a sentence. You have not become a different, broken kind of person. You are a person moving through a hard chapter, governed by the same unshakable law that has ended every winter that has ever existed. It will move. It will change. And the very fact that you are still here, still breathing, still quietly staying alive underneath the frost, means you are already doing exactly what the ground does, waiting faithfully for the season that is coming. Triumph has never once, in the entire history of human achievement, meant the absence of struggle. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because most people quietly believe the opposite. They imagine that somewhere out there is a version of life where the pain simply doesn't show up. where the strong, successful, triumphant people they admire got there by avoiding the very darkness they themselves are drowning in right now. That belief is not just inaccurate. It is one of the most damaging misunderstandings a struggling person can carry, because it convinces them that their pain disqualifies them from the very triumph they're hoping for, when in truth, the pain is the raw material triumph has always been made from. Think about what struggle actually is, stripped down to its function. Struggle is resistance. And resistance, in every physical law that governs this world, is what builds strength. You do not develop strength by lifting nothing. You develop it by lifting something heavy enough to push back against you. The muscle does not grow during the easy repetitions. It grows during the ones that feel like they might break you. And then, in the recovery afterward, it rebuilds itself thicker and more capable than it was before the resistance ever showed up. Nothing in your body, your mind, or your character has ever been strengthened by comfort alone. It has only ever been strengthened by something pushing against it that it had to push back against in return. This is exactly what your struggle is doing right now, whether it feels like it or not. The heaviness, the exhaustion, the days that felt unbearable, none of that is wasted. It cannot be wasted, because that is not how resistance works. It either buries you, or it becomes the exact material your strength gets built from. There is no third option where it simply disappears without having done anything at all, which means the real question was never whether you'd have to struggle. Everyone struggles. The real question is what you allow the struggle to become. I want you to think about a piece of coal again, because the image is worth returning to. Deep underground, under pressure fierce enough to crush almost anything, that coal is not being pampered into becoming a diamond. It is being crushed. If you pause the process halfway through and ask the coal how it was doing, it would have every reason to say it was being destroyed. And yet that exact pressure, sustained, relentless, seemingly merciless, is the only known process that produces something as enduring as a diamond. Nobody ever asks a diamond what it went through to get its clarity, but every diamond went through exactly what you are going through right now, and came out the other side because the pressure did not stop halfway. Here is what I want you to take from this. Stop waiting for the pain to disappear before you consider yourself worthy of a triumphant life. That is not the order in which triumph has ever arrived for anyone. The order is this: struggle shows up first, uninvited, often unbearable. And it is only afterward, sometimes long afterward, that a person looks back and realizes the very thing they thought was destroying them was quietly refining them the entire time. You do not get to skip the pressure and still end up with the diamond. Nobody has ever managed that, no matter how much they wished for it. So if you are in the middle of real struggle right now, do not read your pain as evidence that triumph isn't coming for you. Read it as evidence that the raw material is present, and the only thing left to determine is what you do with it. Keep showing up. Keep staying under the pressure instead of running from it entirely. Because the very thing sitting on your chest right now, the thing that feels like it might crush you completely, is either going to bury you or become the exact substance your future strength is carved from. And that decision is still being made every single day by what you choose to do next. The journey out of depression is not one giant leap. I want to say that again because I think this single misunderstanding is responsible for more people quietly giving up than almost anything else. Somewhere along the way, we absorbed the idea that real transformation has to look dramatic. A single breakthrough morning, one perfect decision, a moment so powerful it instantly rewrites everything that came before it. And because most people wait for that moment, and it never arrives the way they imagined, they conclude that nothing is working, that maybe they're simply built for the dark, that healing is happening for everyone except them. But that conclusion is based on a false premise. Healing was never going to arrive as one giant leap. It arrives as a direction, chosen daily, 1 degree at a time. Picture a large ship crossing an ocean, aimed toward a destination thousands of miles away. Now imagine that ship's course shifts by a single degree. If you were standing on the deck at the moment that shift happened, you would notice nothing at all. The horizon would look identical. The waves would look the same. Even an hour later, even a full day later, the difference would be almost impossible to detect with the naked eye. And yet, if that 1 degree correction is held steady, mile after mile, week after week, that ship does not end up anywhere close to its original heading. It ends up in an entirely different country. The tiny, invisible shift, sustained over distance and time, becomes the entire difference between one destination and another. This is exactly how a person moves from depression toward triumph. And I need you to hear this clearly because it will save you from the exhausting trap of waiting for a dramatic turning point that was never never coming. The shift out of depression rarely feels significant while it's happening. It looks like getting out of bed on a morning your body is begging you to stay under the covers. It looks like opening the curtains, even though the darkness behind them feels safer and more familiar than the light. It looks like eating something small when you have no appetite for food or for anything else life has to offer that day. It looks like moving your body for 10 unremarkable minutes, or telling one person the truth about how you're really doing instead of saying the practiced, hollow, "I'm fine." None of these actions feel like triumph. They feel like almost nothing. But held steady, repeated day after day without needing to feel dramatic, they are the exact 1-degree corrections that eventually deliver a person to a life they could not have imagined from where they started. Here is what makes this both harder and more hopeful than the giant leap version of healing. It is harder because it requires patience most people were never taught to have. There is no single day you can point to and say, that was the day everything changed. The change happens beneath the surface, in the accumulation, in the thousands of small corrections nobody else can see and nobody applauds. But it is also more hopeful because it means you do not need a miracle to begin. You do not need to wait for the perfect breakthrough moment, the ideal circumstances, the sudden absence of pain before you're allowed to start moving in a new direction. You only need today's 1 degree. That is the only requirement, and it has always been available to you, even on your hardest day, even right now. So if you feel like nothing has changed, like all your small efforts have added up to nothing visible, I want you to remember the ship. The ship does not arrive in a new country because of one extraordinary day at sea. It arrives because a small correction was held steady long enough to matter. Choose your 1 degree today. Get up, open the curtain, make the call, take the walk. It will not feel like triumph today. It rarely does. But hold that direction steady, the way the ship holds its course. And one day, not because of one moment, but because of all of them stacked quietly together, you will look up and realize you have arrived somewhere entirely different from where this journey began. You were never meant to make this journey alone. And I want to address this directly, because somewhere along the way, an entire generation absorbed a lie so convincing that it now quietly ruins more lives than almost anything else on this list. The lie is this, that needing help is a form of weakness, that the strong ones are the ones who carry everything themselves, silently, without ever letting anyone else see the weight. And I want to tell you plainly, as clearly as I know how to say anything, that is not strength. That is isolation wearing strength's clothing, and it has cost far too many people far too much. Think about how this belief actually takes shape in a person's life. Someone is drowning quietly on the inside, and instead of reaching for the nearest hand, they convince themselves that reaching out would prove something shameful about them, that they've failed somehow, that a truly capable person wouldn't need to ask, that the moment they say the words, "I'm not okay," out loud, they become someone smaller than they were the moment before. So they say nothing. They smile through it. They perform wellness in every room they walk into, while the real weight sits untouched, unaddressed, and unsupported, growing heavier in the silence they mistook for strength. But look honestly at every person who has ever triumphed over something enormous, and you will find, without exception, that somewhere in their story, at exactly the right moment, they let someone else help carry the weight. Not permanently, not as a replacement for their own effort, but at the specific moment they needed it most. They reached out instead of retreating further inward. And that single act of reaching became one of the turning points their entire recovery was built on. This is not the exception in stories of triumph. It is the rule. Nobody has ever climbed all the way out of a deep pit using only their own 2 hands, with no rope thrown down from above and no one waiting at the top to help pull them the rest of the way. Consider what a rope actually does for a person stuck at the bottom of a pit. The rope does not do the climbing for them. They still have to grip it. They still have to pull. They still have to put in the effort required to rise. But without the rope, without someone on the other end who cared enough to lower it down, the climb becomes nearly impossible, no matter how much effort the person at the bottom is willing to put in. Reaching out for that rope is not a surrender of your effort. It is the only strategy that has ever actually worked for anyone trying to climb out of somewhere truly deep. This is why I need you to release yourself from the exhausting performance of carrying this completely alone. Reaching out to someone, a friend, a family member, a professional trained to help exactly with what you're facing, is not the moment you become weak. It is the moment you become strategic. It is the moment you stop treating isolation as a badge of honor and start treating connection as the tool it has always actually been. The strongest people who have ever lived were not the ones who never needed anyone. They were the ones who knew precisely when to ask and who were humble enough to do it before the weight became unbearable rather than after. So if you are carrying something heavy right now and no one around you knows the truth of what you're going through, let this be the moment that changes. You do not have to carry this in silence to prove your strength. Real strength has never looked like silent suffering. It looks like a person honest enough to say, I need help, and brave enough to keep saying it until the help actually arrives. Reach for the rope. Let someone lower it down, and let the climb, the real triumph, begin the way it always has for everyone who ever made it out. Together, not alone. If any part of what I just said feels like it's describing your life right now, please don't carry it silently for one more day. Send a message to someone you trust and simply tell them, I'm not okay and I need to talk. That sentence will not make you weak. It will be the first honest step of the whole journey back. You were never built to carry this alone, and you don't have to prove that you can. That single distinction, so simple to say, so hard to actually believe when you're living inside the wreckage, is the difference between a person who eventually stands back up and a person who spends the rest of their life kneeling in the rubble of one bad season. Think about the language we use without even noticing it. Someone goes through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a breakdown, a failure that cost them everything. And within weeks, they've quietly rewritten their own identity around it. They stop saying, I went through something hard, and start saying, I'm damaged. They stop saying, that was a terrible year, and start saying, I'm the kind of person things fall apart for. Do you see what happened there? A moment in time got promoted to a permanent title. An event got mistaken for an essence. And once a person accepts that mistaken identity, they stop trying to rebuild, because you don't renovate a house you've already condemned. Here is what nobody tells you in school, in church, in any of the places that are supposed to prepare you for real life. Every single person who has ever built something extraordinary has somewhere in their history a night they'd rather forget, a moment they weren't proud of, a season where they lost the job, lost the marriage, lost the money, lost their nerve, lost their sense of who they even were. The difference between the ones who are still stuck there and the ones who went on to build a remarkable life was never that one group broke and the other didn't. Everyone breaks. Life sees to that. The difference is what each of them decided to call what happened to them. One person says, I had a breakdown, past tense, a thing that occurred, something that happened on a Tuesday in a specific year for specific reasons and is now behind them the way a storm is behind a traveler once they've walked out of it. The other person says, I am broken, present tense, not an event anymore, a condition, a permanent weather system they now believe they live inside forever. And here's the tragedy. The facts of what happened to both people might be nearly identical. The same job loss, the same diagnosis, the same betrayal. The only real difference is the sentence they built around it. And that sentence became the cage or the doorway, depending on which one they chose. This matters because identity drives behavior far more than circumstance ever will. If you believe you are broken, you will act like a broken thing, carefully, fearfully, waiting for the next collapse, treating every new opportunity as something too fragile to risk on someone as unstable as you believe yourself to be. But if you believe you simply went through a breaking, a hard, real, undeniable event, you leave yourself room to do what every event allows for. It ends. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And once you're on the other side of it, you get to decide what comes next. So when you're in the middle of it, when the walls are down and nothing looks like it used to, the most important work you can do isn't fixing the outside circumstances first. It's refusing to let a season write your identity. Say it out loud if you have to. This happened to me. This is not who I am. Let the breaking be a Tuesday, not a title. Let it be a chapter with a page number, not the whole book. Because the moment you stop treating your worst season as your permanent nature, you free yourself to do the only thing that ever actually changes a life. You start building again, brick by brick, on ground that was never as ruined as it looked from where you were kneeling. Every person you have ever admired has a breaking point buried somewhere in their story. And if you dig deep enough, you will always find it. Not sometimes, not usually, always. It is the one thing every remarkable life has in common. And yet, it is the one part of the story that almost never gets told at the award ceremony, the graduation stage, or the interview where they ask someone to explain their success. We hear about the breakthrough. We rarely hear about the break. Think about how we consume other people's success. We see the finished building and assume it rose cleanly from the ground, one polished floor after another. We don't see the demolition that had to happen first. We don't see the night the foundation cracked, the season the whole project nearly got abandoned, the moment the person building it sat alone, wondering if they'd made a catastrophic mistake with their entire life. We only see the ribbon cutting. And because we only see the ribbon cutting, we start to believe that successful people simply skip the part where everything fell apart, that they were built differently, wired stronger, spared somehow from the collapse that the rest of us have to survive. That belief is not just wrong, it is dangerous, because it means that when your own collapse comes, and it will come, it comes for everyone, you will read it as proof that you are not like them. You will treat your breaking point as evidence that you were never cut out for whatever you were reaching for, instead of what it actually is, the exact experience every one of them had to walk through to get where you're watching them from. Here is the truth nobody puts on the trophy. The breaking point is not a detour from the story. It is not a regrettable accident that happened on the way to success, one they'd erase if given the chance. It is the hinge the whole story turns on. Take it out and nothing else makes sense. The confidence they carry now was forged in the exact place they once had none. The clarity they speak with today was earned in the exact season everything was unclear. The strength you're impressed by was built using the very weight that once nearly buried them. You cannot remove the breaking point from their story without also removing the reason the rest of the story exists at all. This is why I want you to change how you interpret your own breaking point the moment it happens. Stop asking, why is this happening to me, as if it disqualifies you from the life you wanted. Start asking, what is this building in me that I could not have built any other way? Because that is exactly what it is doing, whether you can see it yet or not. Every person who has ever rebuilt a life, a career, a marriage, a sense of self after everything fell apart will tell you the same thing if you ask them honestly. I would not be who I am now without that season, not despite it, because of it. So when you find yourself in your own breaking point, and if you're there right now, I want you to really hear this. Do not mistake the middle of the story for the end of it. A hinge is not a wall. A hinge is the part that allows the door to swing open into whatever comes next. You are not standing at the end of your life right now. You are standing at the hinge of it. The door has not shut. It is turning. And one day, if you keep showing up the way people before you have shown up, you will look back at this exact season, the one that feels unbearable right now, and you will recognize it for what it always was. Not the collapse of your story, the hinge it turned on. There is a strange kind of confusion that happens when everything in your life seems to be falling apart at once. From where you're standing, in the middle of it, it looks like destruction. It looks like loss. It looks like the ground giving way beneath everything you thought you'd built. But I want you to consider a possibility that almost nobody offers you in the moment you need it most. What looks like collapse from the inside is very often construction in disguise. Think about what actually happens when a real foundation gets laid for a building meant to last. Before a single beautiful thing rises out of the ground, something else has to happen first, and it isn't pretty. The old structure, if there was one, has to come down. The ground has to be dug up, torn open, cleared of everything that was sitting on top of it, including things that looked perfectly fine from the surface. Pipes get exposed, wires get pulled. The earth itself gets disturbed in ways that, if you walked past the site and didn't know what was coming, you would swear something had gone terribly wrong. It looks like a disaster zone. It looks like ruin. And yet this exact process, this exact mess, is the only way anything strong enough to last has ever been built. Nobody pours a real foundation onto ground that was never disturbed. Your life works the same way. And this is the part almost nobody tells you when you're the one standing in the wreckage. The season where the job disappears, the relationship ends, the health scare rearranges your priorities. The plan you'd built your whole identity around falls apart in front of you. That season feels like pure loss because you can only see what's being torn up. You cannot yet see what's being laid down underneath it. Because foundations are, by their very nature, invisible for a long time. Nobody builds a foundation and then admires it. They cover it up and build on top of it, which means the very thing that will one day hold up the strongest version of your life is happening right now, in the dark, in the mess, in the part of the process nobody nobody gets to see or applaud. This is why judging your life by how it looks in the middle of the demolition is one of the most costly mistakes a person can make. If you look at torn up ground and conclude that nothing good could ever come from it, you will walk away from the very site where your strongest life was about to be built. You will go looking for easier ground somewhere else, ground that was never disturbed, never dug into, never tested, and you will build a life on top of it that looks fine on the surface, but was never actually anchored to anything. Meanwhile, the person who stayed, who let the digging happen, who tolerated the mess long enough for the concrete to be poured and cured, ends up with something the easier ground could never have given them. A life that can hold real weight. So when everything is falling apart around you right now, I want you to reframe what you're actually looking at. You are not watching your life get destroyed. You are watching the parts that could never have held up the future get cleared away, so that something can finally be laid down that will. The instability you feel is not proof that nothing solid is coming. It is the exact sensation of ground being prepared for something solid to be poured. It will not stay this way. No foundation stays exposed forever. Somewhere ahead of you, on ground you cannot yet see the shape of, something is going to rise that would never have been possible on the comfortable, undisturbed ground you were standing on before everything broke. Let the digging happen. Let the mess be the mess for as long as it needs to be. Because what's underneath a real foundation is never visible until long after it's already holding everything up. Nobody rebuilds a life in one dramatic moment, no matter how much we wish that were true. We love the idea of the single turning point, the speech that changes everything, the sunrise epiphany, the one decision made on a mountaintop that instantly transforms a person from broken to whole. It makes for a wonderful story. It is almost never how it actually happens. Real recovery, the kind that holds up under pressure and doesn't collapse the first time life gets hard again, is built through something far less cinematic. The same small, unremarkable choice made over and over on days when nobody is watching and nothing about it feels significant at all. Think about what recovery actually looks like once you strip away the highlight reel. It looks like getting out of bed on a morning when every part of you wants to stay under the covers. It looks like making the bed anyway, even though the rest of your life feels unmade. It looks like eating something, even when you have no appetite for food or for anything else. It looks like one honest phone call to someone you trust. One short walk outside when the walls of the house feel like they're closing in. One night you chose to stay in the room instead of walking out of it. None of these moments look like turning points while you're living them. They look like nothing. They look like the bare minimum. But here is what almost nobody tells you. The bare minimum, repeated with enough consistency, is exactly what rebuilding is made of. This is precisely why so many people give up too early on their own recovery. They are waiting for the big moment, the day they wake up and simply feel like themselves again, all at once, completely restored. And because that day rarely arrives the way they imagined it, they conclude that nothing is working, that they must not be trying hard enough, that maybe they really are as stuck as they feel. But recovery was never going to announce itself with fireworks. It was always going to arrive quietly, disguised as a Tuesday, hidden inside 100 small decisions that individually look like nothing and collectively become everything. Consider what happens physically when a broken bone heals. There is no single dramatic instant where the bone goes from shattered to strong. There is a slow, invisible process happening beneath the surface every single day. Cells doing quiet, unglamorous work that nobody can see and nobody applauds. Until one day, weeks or months later, the bone that was once broken is stronger at the point of the break than it was before. That is not a metaphor I'm reaching for. That is simply how healing has always worked, in the body and in the life. It happens beneath the surface, through repetition, long before it shows up as something visible. So if you are in the middle of rebuilding right now, I need you to release yourself from the exhausting search for the one decision that will fix everything. There isn't one. There never was. What there is instead is today's decision, the only one that has ever actually been available to any person in any recovery in the history of the world. Will you get up today? Will you make one honest choice today? Will you take one small action today that moves you a single inch closer to the life you're trying to rebuild, even though it feels utterly insignificant in the moment you're making it? That is the entire mechanism of recovery. Not one great leap, but 10,000 small steps that nobody sees you take. And one day, not because of one moment, but because of all of them stacked quietly on top of each other, you will look back and realize the person who couldn't get out of bed is the same person who is now standing, steady, On ground they rebuilt themselves, one unremarkable Tuesday at a time. Nobody will have witnessed the individual bricks, but they will all be able to see the wall. If you are in that dark room right now, don't leave this moment without doing one small thing for yourself. Reach out to one person today and tell them the truth about how you're really doing. Not tomorrow, not when things get better, today, while it still feels hard. Because the reaching out is not weakness. It is the first brick of the life you're about to rebuild.